Kia ora everybody, welcome to the next video for the Avondale Pavilion project, and you're tuning into Dr. Berst from Auckland, New Zealand. And on this month's episode we have a special guest with us, Fluro. Thanks for joining us. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you got into graffiti?
So I grew up in Christchurch, and then I guess I was always into art and drawing and that kind of thing, but in high school I started, I guess, just drawing like letters and decorating letters, and I had like a lot of friends who were into hip hop and like b-boys, and lots of my friends were dancers as well, and I definitely was not a dancer, so I guess they introduced me to graffiti. They weren't writers necessarily, but just they had an interest in it and hip hop generally. So they introduced me to it and said you should get into graffiti. But it was more just like really the style, a style of art for me at the time, because I didn't really understand the scene or the culture. It was just a way of being involved in hip hop when I was not ever going to be a dancer.
What type of graffiti did they show you?
I think it was like at the time maybe like it was actually like a lot of the German writers, so like Cantu, and then is it Dime or Dank? So yeah, they introduced me to those guys really, and that was the kind of style.
Was that stuff that they showed you on the internet, or was that in like magazines and stuff?
I think it was on the internet, and also they had there was YCD, so that was the youth and cultural development, like a spot where people would go and kind of hang out. Like there was like basketball hoop, and there would be like MC battles and b-boy battles and stuff, and Dame one time had painted there, and I definitely remember one of his pieces. I don't know, it was a little bit later, but Cantu, wow, I remember they came to and they painted it like the ghost yards. So they were actually like the main international writers that I'd seen in Christchurch as well.
Was Fluro the first name you had chosen, or was there other ones?
There were other ones. Not as. I started writing hostile, but people kept calling it hostile, so.
That's not very nice.
Yeah, so I cut that one.
What was the scene in Christchurch like at that time when you first started?
I think it was pretty active. Actually, when I started, I did write hostile, and then I think I started writing Fluro when I moved to Auckland. But I didn't actually know like a lot of writers, but there was a lot of graffiti around, and I pretty much just wander down and look at the track sides. And
what was the most memorable bit of graffiti that you saw in Christchurch?
I don't remember a specific piece, but there were like a lot of DTR walls, and I used to go to the ghost yards in Waltham and the sheep sheds. They were pretty much places that I'd go.
What's the sheep shed?
It's not there anymore, but it was around for like years, by Hagley Park, and just like an old sheep sheds, I guess, and it was just kind of a shell of a place, but not like massive walls really. Or
was it kind of like an abandoned building, or was it?
Yeah, it just didn't have like a roof. It's kind of just walls, but it was pretty chill. I think it was semi-legal for a while.
And so before you got into graffiti, did you have a life or kind of any other interest before that? In high school and stuff, I was pretty much into like a lot of sports and maybe snowboarding and a little bit of skateboarding, like really badly. And yeah, I kind of was into sports and just being outdoors. And actually, like as a teenager, I didn't know anything about graffiti like earlier on in my teens, but we would, like my friends and I would always go out like stealing street signs and kind of breaking into, I don't know, places, just silly like teenage stuff. But I guess I wish I'd known about graffiti then, because it kind of would have appealed to like all of us probably. But and so you mentioned that some of your friends kind of during this period of time had introduced you to graffiti, but to actually take that step to go out there and start painting and be active and all these things, what was it that kind of took you down that trajectory? Was it a person, or was it linking up with people? What was the thing that kind of pushed you?
Yeah, I think it was just one of my friends was actually trying to get me painting pretty much, and I met a couple of guys and they knew like Icarus and Wongi, and they introduced me to Ix, and then we went and painted once, I think, and he was kind of teaching me a bit about graffiti, and pretty much just, so that was my first time painting. And then my other friend, I don't know how I got hold of him, but he was talking to Scream online, and then so I went and painted with him in Fiasco, and that was like the second time I painted, I think. That was kind of how I started painting, but then like I didn't keep painting with anyone particularly, so, but yeah, then I kind of stopped for a few years, and I went to China and taught English, and then yeah, when I came back, I think it was I can't remember what year, but I went to the Polytech in Christchurch, ran like these summer courses. They did like, so Decipher ran the graffiti course, and pretty much you'll pay $10 and you get like a black book and all the paint, and you could just go paint a piece on like the Polytech, or like, I don't know, we painted once inside the gym, but everyone would turn up. Like there were like a lot of like the local writers would just turn up. I did like the graffiti one, and there's like a DJ one as well. So, and Mark, actually, yeah, that's how I met Mark back then. So he was kind of like helping run it as well.
Was that like a community initiative type thing, or was that?
Yeah, I think it was actually. I think it was maybe like potentially run through the council, or it was definitely run through the Polytech as well, I guess. But yeah.
It sounds like you've linked up with quite a lot of veterans in the game quite early on. And so my question to you is that in another interview that you had done earlier, you mentioned that you really enjoyed exploring and the kind of aspect of adventure and, you know, taking risks. What was the thing that instilled that into you, or have you always kind of had that?
Yeah, I think like taking risks has always, on some level, been part of who I am. Like as a kid, I was always building huts and looking for some like secret places to, I don't know, hide out. And yeah, I always had like a sense of adventure. I'd read books about like mystery places and like secret trapdoors, and I guess like exploring was a big thing. Taking risks was something it is definitely a part of who I am, but it's also like something I struggle with a lot as well, because growing up I had like a ton of rules, and I used to get busted for literally everything. Like I just never got away with anything, so it was always kind of like this paranoia that followed me a bit as well. So I guess for me, graffiti was actually like not like a supernatural thing in a way, but it was for me it was a way of like breaking out of that some mentalities and just being like, okay, if I do this, you don't always get busted straight away. Like,
what did your parents or family think about you doing graffiti?
Yeah, I mean, to start with, they were definitely not keen. Like they like pretty much just hated anything to do with hip hop, to be honest. And like, I don't know what it was. I think it was actually like some of my friends who actually weren't graffiti writers at all, like, but they just didn't really like them at the time. And I think they associated it with them because I was hanging out with them and I was also like getting into graffiti, but they were actually quite separate. I think it was just more their association that they made, which wasn't necessarily accurate, but they were pretty much worried about me all the time that something like, not just with graffiti, but just generally, they were worried that something terrible would happen to me, I think. So it took them like quite a while to come around, and I think it was meeting like a few of my friends and meeting even like Elliot, like and just being, they started to realize like the opportunities that came from it, like travel was always being like super important to them and us as a family, I guess. So they were like, oh, there's opportunity, there's like intelligent people who are talented and, you know, like making careers out of graffiti, or, you know, related to graffiti, or like they just basically have opportunity that comes from it. So I think seeing that, they started to become a lot more supportive, and now they're pretty sweet. Like I think that actually my sense of adventure comes from my mum, and I didn't really realize till a bit later on. But
who would you say are some important kind of mentors or friends or peers that have kind of helped you along the way in this kind of graph journey?
I met Mark a long time ago, and he was always really encouraging. And so when I moved to Auckland, I didn't really know, in 2007, I didn't really know anyone, so I but yeah, he would always like check on me and see how I was doing and see if I wanted to go paint or anything. Around the same time, meeting Eskew and Livy, and then being put in Stick Up Girls, and those guys were pretty massive in getting me established like in Auckland, and also the connections going overseas around then too. So that was pretty, yeah, I guess at the start they were like definitely the most influential people for me.
Like when you moved to Auckland, was that when you actually started painting graph more actively?
Yeah, I think that was kind of my intention. Like I had a good friend here. She was from Christchurch, so we were kind of gonna start painting together. And she like actually died just before I moved up, but that was why I was moving up initially. But yeah, that was kind of the plan. I felt like I didn't really feel super connected to the Christchurch scene. They were like definitely cool people, but I just couldn't really find where I fit as such. And like I knew Mark up here, and I felt like I'd heard of like a few female writers in Christchurch, but I don't think they were living there when I was there, or like weren't necessarily super active at the time. I knew like Diva was in Auckland, and I'd heard of other like O'Shea, and I'd heard of other girls writing too, which was kind of something that was a bit of a motivation for me.
And could you tell me a little bit about how you got down with SUG? What's the kind of story behind that?
When I think in the first week that I moved up, actually I met a guy from Berlin, and he was in Christchurch, and then I'd met him in Christchurch, and then he was travelling up here, and then I moved up around the same time that he happened to be here, and I caught up with him, but he was at a party at Eskew's house, so I went there and then met him and a few others like Sen. Yeah, he introduced me to everyone, and then I actually met the guys that first got me in, the B-boys from Christchurch that first got me into graffiti, happened to be at the party too. After I'd been in Auckland for a couple of years, I think it was 2008 or 2009, I actually don't remember, but just hanging out with Livy more as well, and then she asked me if I wanted to be in SUG.
And SUG, for the people that don't know, is an all-female graph crew, global, with members from all around the world. What is 3K? I know that's another crew that you're a part of.
3K is 3K Caliber. It's an all-female at the moment, a kind of hip-hop crew, and so there are maybe 8 or 9 members at the moment, and we're all like from New Zealand. Some are living in Aussie, and I guess we're all kind of just friends, more or less. Like it was started by Specs, more or less in memory of her cousin Lils, who died. Not in memory of her, but just that's kind of where the name comes from, because she was like Ice Cold Lils 3000, so that's where the 3K comes from. But yeah, it was just, I mean, we don't really like do anything together too much. We just hang out. We just support each other in life stuff, I guess, and we don't get to catch up as much as we'd like to, because we're all in different cities and stuff. But
do you think that hip-hop package is still alive and well? The whole 4 elements?
I don't think so. Like, not in New Zealand anyway. Like, there are definitely pockets where it is more, but yeah, I think for maybe for the KWA guys, and for maybe in Australia a bit more, it is a bit more connected. Like, when I first started like writing, there were like heaps of b-boy jams, and there was like places like YCD, and there would be like MC battles, and the b-boys would be there, and then and the graffiti writers and stuff would be there and stuff. But I don't see that like now.
It feels like quite a complete package.
Yeah.
To have all those elements, even though that's not really what we see these days. Turning a little bit back to SUG and 3K, obviously when we think about graffiti, it's quite a masculine or male kind of dominated scene or movement. Where do you think females kind of fit into this space here?
Yeah, I think definitely for women it's different. I can't say whether it's like better or worse really, but it's just, and also it depends on the person too and their own experiences, but there are definitely way less females in graffiti than men, so there are like a lot of benefits to it, like I enjoy it. I think it's worthwhile being a part of, but yeah, I think there are a few things, like some of them are obviously generalizations and there are definitely exceptions to the rules, but evidently there are far less women, so there's got to be some reason for it. So I think the generalizations aren't too far off sometimes, but I think maybe just the women and men have different drives. Like guys do tend in general to take more risks than the woman, so the riskier side of graffiti is maybe not as appealing, or like can be quite ego driven as well. So obviously anything I'm saying is pretty much a generalization, but the ego aspect isn't as much there for women. And then I think I didn't grow up with my friends writing graffiti or being interested in it, so I think there's, for one, the introduction isn't always there, so you just don't meet other. I sort of teaching graffiti, just doing some workshops at like a youth lockup facility in Christchurch, and I noticed that like the girls were a lot more reluctant to try anything. Like I don't know if they were quite shy, and they were like, until they saw another girl doing it, they were kind of like, I don't know. And the guys were like right into it. Like maybe they weren't afraid to fail as much. Maybe that's something as well. Or like, it's just, I don't know why, but the girls were like way more reluctant. And then the one thing for women, I guess, it can be like, if you see another girl doing it, you're like, oh, I could do that as well. Definitely starting off is maybe a bit more difficult. When you do start painting, you might find it like the dynamic is different with guys than it would be with other girls. There are like definitely things that go down that just make it harder to connect and build like lasting connections with other writers, I guess. Like it's just pretty much how it is. And again, there are exceptions to that rule too. Like it's a personality thing as well. Like if you're more outgoing and whatever, then it would probably be easier. But the connection thing's massive in regards to like staying motivated and staying in graffiti. To keep painting, you really need connection on some level. Like you being part of a crew, or just having people to push you, or like to bounce off, to vibe with, kind of to get you out of the house to go paint, or like it is really a relationship thing, on at least on some level. So if you can't build those relationships with other writers, then that will probably mean that you don't stick with it for as long as you otherwise would. So that can be harder for women, I think. Maybe also like just different responsibilities, like when you have kids and stuff, I think it can often be hard to balance. I don't know why it's not the same ways for guys. I mean, when anyone has kids, they've obviously got a lot more to juggle, but I've seen quite a few girls quit once they have kids, so I do think about it a lot, and probably like, I mean, I'm still going, but I'm pretty inactive a lot of the time, and it's really motivation, and I do struggle to like find consistent people to paint with too, so, sometimes. So I also, talking to my friends who are B girls, they're like kind of find the same thing sometimes. Like, like I don't have anyone to jam with, and I mean, obviously you can go by yourself, but it is a bit harder to stay motivated.
Could you tell us a little bit about your first time travelling overseas?
Yeah, that is one of the greatest motivations, is definitely travel. I think the first time I went overseas and painted was 2009, so that was just put down and stick up girls, I think either like 2008 or 2009, so it was a good opportunity to go and meet some of the girls. And so I can't remember where I started. I think I went through China and then went to Germany and met Cine there, and then actually I went to Germany, and then I went to the Netherlands, and then somehow connected with a couple of guys there and painted like near my auntie's house, and then went to Amsterdam, painted there. Yeah, I think I just went Netherlands, and then I went to New York. I went to New York from there, which was amazing. That was just something I'd always wanted to do.
Could you paint us a little bit of a picture of New York?
It was full on, it was cool because actually two of the stick-up girls were there. Spice was there and Shiro was there as well at the same time, and another guy from Sydney that I'd met too. So there were a few people that I knew or actually I hadn't met the two stick-up girls there at the time, but I met them there, so that was cool. And then Elliot hooked me up with a few people there as well, which worked out really well, and they looked after me. Lots of painting, which was awesome.
And you also went to Kuala Lumpur. What was the experience of painting in Asia?
Yeah, I went there. So I went to Singapore with a few of my friends, and then I just jumped on a bus, I think, and went to Kuala Lumpur from Singapore. And it was cool because I didn't actually know anybody, and I didn't really know what to expect, and I hadn't planned it, but I kind of enjoyed that part of it. I got introduced to one guy, Ian, and he was really involved in hip hop too, but he knew a few writers, and then he introduced me to them, and they were really cool. They were pretty funny and showed me around, and there were just so many, just crazy spots to paint, and you just paint motorway spots. Yeah, it was sick. They were a lot of fun, and nothing was painted. There's an abandoned mall, and yeah, it was awesome. And I was just painting it was super hot, but I don't mind the heat, but it was just kind of hectic, the race for the airport after.
Could you tell us a little bit about your actual style of graffiti? What is it influenced by?
Definitely influenced by, I guess, New York, pretty classic New York graffiti. I think what I wanted to do was, I started off adding, when I first started writing, was just adding arrows and crazy stuff to everything, and basically I decided that I wanted to kind of cut that back and focus on at least getting some, I guess my style is pretty simple now, and then also I guess my style would be described as clean, and I think I always have kind of quite a lot going on in my head, so it's for me just I try to make everything as balanced as possible and clean, and so at least I can get my head around it.
And what influences the kind of development of your style?
Just I'll see something and then I'll be I really like that style, or I want to make things a bit more abstract my letters a bit more and break out of the outline, just the way I've been doing it. So just probably not even graffiti, maybe abstract art or colours, and probably stuff I see online mostly at the moment.
I know that some of the work for that typographic stuff, you're inspired by song lyrics, is that correct?
Yeah.
And so what's the themes or ideas or messages that you're trying to communicate when you're creating that type of work?
I think it's probably even more just my appreciation of hip-hop music, and I'm not musical at all, so it's just my way of expressing that appreciation. And also sometimes just it's more or less anything that I'll hear lyrics or a phrase that resonates with me, and then pretty much I like things that kind of have multiple, that can be taken in different ways. They're kind of more subjective meanings that I guess they might mean something. It might mean something to me, but it might not be taken the same way by somebody else. But just anything that pops into that means something to me, really.
And who are some of your favorite kind of musicians or bands?
I really like Odyssey. He's probably one of my favorites. And then I like a few producers, maybe like Jay Dilla and Black Milk, Apollo Brown. Lots of Detroit stuff. So like a lot of the work that I do will probably be like it's titles or song titles or some lyric. I mean, something like Bright Black Sky is like an Apollo Brown track. It's like an instrumental. And I'm starting to try to learn like some animation and stuff, like really basic.
Yeah.
But just getting my head around After Effects and stuff, and then at least I could maybe animate type probably more, like a bit. So I'm keen to explore that more, but I haven't really done anything yet. But if I could do something like that, it would probably be.
Recently, you were put into TMD. What has being part of TMD meant to you since you've been put down in this crew?
Obviously, it does mean a lot to me, and I didn't actually think it was like a possibility. Like I didn't really know there were any. I kind of just thought, yeah, I think it's just cool because I've actually got people around me who I think other time, like with my other crews, I usually don't have anybody in the same. Oh, I might have like one or two people in the same city, but we're not even in the same country usually, and we can't plan things together or can't really do a whole lot. But it's exciting to have. It's awesome to have a crew and a bunch of people who are always sort of pushing the boundaries and pushing the limits, and you kind of have that motivation really to. Whatever you do, you're going to need to put like 100, you're going to need to put all of yourself into what you're doing. And yeah, so it's massive for motivation and also opportunity and just having that connection, I guess, which is definitely hugely important for.
So we're nearly kind of towards the end. So could you tell us a little bit about, I know that you've got your kind of graph practice. You've also got some of the typographic works that you do, but as well as that, your background's in graphic design, is that correct?
Yeah.
So is that something that you do full time?
Yeah, I do that full time at the moment. It's not like the love of my life. I think it's definitely something I enjoy, but I enjoy it most when it's working on my own stuff and part of a whole project where it's a great skill to have because you can apply it to your own brand and whatever you're doing, but it's often you won't be doing like the most exciting work for the most exciting clients, and you're quite often working on somebody else's style and within their parameters and that kind of thing. But I'm learning a lot at the moment. Like I've started doing some video editing at work and After Effects stuff as well, which is really good because I can use it for my own stuff too. So it's a good opportunity to learn.
I mean, that's probably a good segue to our last question, which is really about the Avondale Pavilion project. With the pavilion that you just painted, I gave you kind of an open brief. What was the kind of concept or approach to creating the artwork that you created for this?
Yeah, I went through a few, I was trying to work out what to do really, because what I want to do with my art a bit more is really abstract to the point where they're like not as recognizable. But I wanted to start with something, so I just started with the word Avondale and then kind of broke that up into the letters going around and then tried to sort of abstract that a little bit, so I'm not sure how successful that was.
I think it came out pretty dope. And just one last thing that I've got a question about as well is, what do you think about these types of initiatives of kind of graph in the community, and do you think that we need to see more of it?
Yeah, definitely. I think especially with some graffiti stuff, because it can often be street art's very palatable, which is great, but it's just having a bit more, I guess, graffiti style in there as well is cool.
That's definitely been one of my motivations, is to bring more writers on board to do projects like this, because I feel like it's a segment of the art kind of community that perhaps don't always get these opportunities, and perhaps more like street art will kind of be at the forefront of participating in the community to do things. So to be able to do something like this and involve writers is quite important. Awesome. So thanks, Fluro, for joining us tonight to have a little bit of a chat about the Avondale Pavilion project, and we're pretty much going to wrap it up here, but make sure you guys stay tuned for more content. Next month we have another special guest with us under the name Trust Me, so make sure you come and check it out.